I read an article yesterday about how a woman in the UK saw fit to have an abortion because of, and I quote, extreme morning sickness. You heard me right, morning sickness. Now the article then went on to give a litany of the horrible symptoms that this poor woman felt as a result of the plague of morning sickness she was subjected to, and then they also mentioned that her pregnancy was 100% planned. This is what Western society has degenerated into. A woman can get pregnant on purpose and have an abortion because of morning sickness. But you know, this is the perfect type of ammunition needed to validate the inefficacy of the presumption of motherhood. Now, in this feminized society where women are considered to be the manifestations of innocence on planet Earth, it's assumed that mothers intrinsically think about what's best for the children before they think about themselves. Now, I'm here to challenge this line of thought, and I say it's men who care and always have cared more about their children and their families. Now, let's examine the woman in this article. This woman already has a 2-year-old daughter. She got pregnant again on purpose and then chose to cite morning sickness as a reason to abort what would have been her second child. This indicates that this woman first thinks about whatever discomfort she will have to go through before deciding whether or not her children are allowed to be born. She chose to allow her daughter to be born and to prevent her next child from being born on the basis of how hard she perceived the pregnancy was for her. This type of behavior shows an inability to endure temporary sacrifice for the sake of your own children, and this is never talked about when assessing the validity of the presumption of motherhood. And since the presumption of motherhood wields so much power in the family and divorce courts of the West, it's only fair that we examine it to the point where there's no question as to whether or not it merits the ridiculous child support laws, the astronomical, record-breaking $750 million divorce settlements as we've seen with Tiger Woods, and so on and so forth. It's time we take a long, hard look at the presumption of motherhood. Now, as I said before, women are citing all types of trivial reasons to have abortion, which already goes against the idea that women do what's best for their children by default. Abortion could never be considered to be for the children for obvious reasons, but since feminists don't listen to what's logical and obvious, I'll spell it out for them. What possible benefit can an aborted child receive from his or her mother? None. Now, it's this tendency of American women to get pregnant and then choose which children get to live or die that shows their inability to consider what's best for the interests of the child, because by definition, any woman having an abortion is thinking one thing and one thing only: what's in the best interest for me? Men are the undisputed caretakers and defenders of children, not only on a parental but societal level as a whole. Now, I've talked about how women claim that they're equals to men, but as soon as the ship starts sinking, it's the men who get left behind to figure it out while women and children are evacuated. But I've never really put it into perspective. Ask yourself, what kind of a coward does it take to pretend they're as competent, capable, and strong as men, and then when shit hits the fan, they want to be evacuated with children at the same time? That means that for every child evacuated with a woman, another child has to wait longer to escape danger. And women know this, because instead of first evacuating all children along with a small group of adults to make sure they're safe, grown women feel entitled to escape danger at the same time as defenseless children. Men as a whole will never ever indulge in such cowardice because men are damn near obsessed with making sure no harm comes to children. If you disagree, let me ask you this. Who are the ones that take out the vast majority of life insurance policies for their families? Which gender collectively spends billions of dollars on insurance policies that provide for their children under the express condition of death only? This is the thought process of men. So long as men are alive and have children, they work to provide them safety and shelter, and take precautions while they're alive to make sure that even in the event of their untimely death, their children are still taken care of by shelling out monthly installments of their hard-earned cash for life insurance policies. Now check the stats and you'll find that men are the vast majority of life insurance policy holders, even in an age where women are overtaking men in the workforce. Now, why haven't we seen a gradual spike in the number of women purchasing life insurance policies for their families in the past 50 years as a result of them being brought into the workplace? Why is that? Not only do men work 50, 60, or even 80-hour weeks and more to provide for their children, but also put measures into place to ensure that even if they die in the almost exclusively male workplace deaths that happen every year, or from the amount of stress and health problems that working all those hours causes, they still make sure that their families and children are taken care of, period. And what happens to men if they can't provide for their children, or if they justifiably refuse to do so because of parental alienation made possible by the child support racket? Well, they lose their license, or their passport, or they get tossed in jail. And these are just examples of how individual men are forced by taxation and even the threat of jail to ensure that children are provided for. Now, of course, the feminist rebuttal will be if you don't want to pay child support, don't have children and not take care of them and blah, blah, blah. But it's much deeper than that. Because not only do men go out of their way to protect and provide for their own children, but men, which constitute the majority of taxpayer revenue, get the distinct pleasure of having to see their tax dollars fund the welfare checks for irresponsible and spoiled single mothers and their children. That's right, men aren't only expected to work to pay for their own children, but the state takes it upon themselves to use tax dollars to bail single mothers out of their inability to keep their legs closed. And men have to pay for it. That's right. Women who have children they know they can't even take care of by themselves are showered with provisions from welfare checks and women and infant and children institutions courtesy of Big Brother. And a man who can't provide for his children gets thrown in jail courtesy of Big Brother. Because men that for whatever reason can't or refuse to take care of their children get dragged kicking and screaming into doing so. Men pay the vast amount of child support, alimony, life insurance, medical bills, house bills, college tuition, and a myriad of other expenses for their children and their families, yet all I ever hear is men are deadbeat dads and the presumption of motherhood is stronger than it's ever been. So let me spell it out for men in the West. If you decide to have children, be very careful who you choose to do so with. And the only way you can completely avoid the trap of child support is by not having children. And when you think about the multifaceted level of evil that is feminism, you realize that the best and the brightest of men, when faced with the overall picture of feminism, would be extremely reluctant to have children, which ensures that the men most capable of decoding feminism and showing other men what its true nature really is are least likely to reproduce. I mean, it's just staggeringly evil when you think about it, and that's why it's up to us, it's up to men, MRAs, to at the very least leave behind a prolific and permanent record of what men had to say during the era of third wave feminism and misandry, so that someone 200 years from today will listen to what we had to say and make up his mind for himself. But anyway, understand what the presumption of motherhood really is all about. Just another mechanism for the demonization and control of men in the wasteland that is Western society.